Well, okay. Okay.
Speaking of haircuts,
Okay.
by God, the kid has one of the worst haircuts I've ever seen. Like I would kick the shit out of this kid
I
too,
know
just
it's
for
that
that fucking
weird.
No, no,
haircut.
you need to
Uh,
slap his mother.
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
The
Yeah.
the this scene
Although if
here
you
in
look at his current picture on IMDb, he looks pretty good now.
Oh yeah.
this scene in the restaurant where
Doing just fine.
he what does he call her?
A
Like
daft hippie.
a daft hippie? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like I was like, finally.
Yeah.
Finally.
That
Like
That
carries
is the most satisfying scene in the whole movie.
it's the best scene in the movie
because
by
she is.
far.
Well, interesting that one of the
Well,
things.
the argument they have is really good. Like
Yeah.
it's a really good, and then you have the sort of wait staff and all the people sort of Britishly trying not to look at it.
Right.
Like,
Oh,
and then eventually the manager comes out and he's like, "You need to calm down." Like,
Well, this is a peripheral rom-com. It's not really a rom-com. It's actually more of a drama.
Mhm.
But the rules of the rom-com are still here. Because it has Hugh Grant in it, and there is a couple of romances going on in this thing. It's
and
just
there's
it's got
some calm. There's
and
not
there's
much
and there's
calm.
a serious calm. So and it's about that light. It has that light rom-com feel to it, where everything's even though Tony Collette's
This
character,
did not.
yeah, Tony Collette's character,
Absolutely did not.
yeah. Anyway,
No, this sort of steps into that weird, like, I'm not saying it is this, but that sort of Hallmark movie where somebody gets cancer and dies. Like it's that sort of like, we're not really sure how to feel about this for the whole thing because the tone is a little up and down.
yeah. Well, you have to have rom-coms have to have at least somebody with a serious illness in them. That's one of the weird things about the genre. And she's obviously suicidal, right? And the thing is, they show it just out bold the first act. She's out there, vomiting on the floor in the 9 yards, and they spend the rest of the film tiptoeing around it. Actually, every time someone says the suicide, and they stop him basically.
Yeah, he does this, makes a point of finding a different way of saying it.
Yeah,
at that dinner,
which is addressing the narrative, but it also addresses the genre, which is interesting. It's like,
yeah, well, it's polite company, so you actually would try to soften that in conversation in a public setting like that,
right?
And yet, it's also the movie tiptoeing around it. It's both, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Well, but then the friend shows up, and it's just off to the fucking races.
Yeah,
like. So everything goes out the window as soon as she shows up. Like,
well, it doesn't go out the window. It's a recurring problem for the boy. What's the boy's name? Marcus. That is mentally ill. But I mean, a movie like this, it does kind of have to soft pedal and tiptoe around this stuff for it to be a comedy.
I mean, all the decorum, all of the sort of politeness goes out the window as soon as the friend shows up. It's just like the fucking claws come out as soon as she walks in the room on multiple sides.
Right. Yeah, and it's Cole. What's his? God, Marcus. Marcus that stands up for him, which is kind of a great character moment for him. He stands up to his mom for the first time.
Well, it's nice because it's like you give a character arc to Hugh Grant's character, but also the boy, which is great.
Well, you have the moment in this scene where it cuts to his internal monologue, and he's like, "I'm really confused because my mom's wrong."
Yeah,
like that may be the first time he's ever knowingly seen his mom be wrong.
Right. Yeah, he's moving from dependency as a child to like a more independent teenager kind of thing.
He's forming an opinion about her.
He's probably questioning how his relationship with his mother goes.
I mean, it's a great relationship on one level. They're very close. I mean,
the friend, you're right. The friend exposes it. It's great, actually. And it kind of everything kind of gets in the third act goes into high gear at that point. Also, Rachel Weisz showing up is pretty good too. She's adds a lot to this, I think.
She's always
I don't think so. Actually, I like her. I tend to really like her in things. I think she's massively underused in this movie. Like
she's a third act complication. How much traction should get?
I'm gonna jump to the final line here, which is I don't like this movie, and in fact, watching this movie second made me like Notting Hill more. This movie is 50% of a good movie, and that's not enough for me. Like the kid is a little too precocious.
That's nails on chalkboard for me, man.
The relationships are a little too convenient. The twists are a little too obvious. Like it's well made. Like that's one of the things about this movie is like it's well acted. I think the script is fairly tight. Like
Is this Richard Curtis who wrote it?
No,
The other guy.
the other Richard Curtis wrote the other one. This
Yeah, okay.
one. So
This is
this one.
Paul and Chris Weitz.
Chris Weitz, the guy who co-wrote
the
Rogue
guys
One.
that made American Pie.
Yeah.
So what I've read a bunch of his books. I started reading them after High Fidelity, so I devoured this one. I think this was an excellent book.
Mhm. I
I was really excited until I found out who was doing it.
Oh,
And I saw it pretty quickly in the theater, and I put this in the same, while I still have a lot of fondness for this movie, I put this in the same bucket as I think about what they did to the Alex Garland's novel The Beach, when yay, the dude that made Train Spotting, Ewan McGregor has just been replaced by Leonardo DiCaprio. And you if you compare that book, which is extremely fucking dark and has a really dark ending, and then Hollywood gets a hold of it and does what they, I mean, I still like a lot of The Beach, but it's not the same thing as the book. There's so many tonal changes because they're trying to thread the needle between drama and rom-com in this movie.
mhm.
I mean, what it's got going for it, I mean, I actually think
It has a lot of the worst tropes of rom-coms.
well, I will say for what, like, the reason I want to do this second was because Hugh Grant has dropped the shtick that is in full display
Mhm.
in the other movie. Like
It's
this,
it's the Family Guy. Oh, I'm so charmingly befuddled.
but
Right.
He's not
him
floppy
playing a
anymore.
cad. This
No.
is a cad. Like this is kind of a dick.
He's a piece of shit.
Right. He's
Actually,
Like
it's-
it's one of the things this was my favorite yelling about movies movie from last year is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which might be one of my next picks actually.
Oh, not so bad.
He's great in that.
He's such a dick in that movie. Like he is just an
This is-
incredible cock
this
through
is
that
a
entire
transition
film.
point.
But the
No.
thing is, in this film, in the beginning of the film, his dickishness is epic and totally overexplained. I am a complete dick because of this, and this is how I have my life arranged. And
That's just them. They didn't know what else to do other than
I'm-
put the fucking best bits of the book in as narration.
also,
it's
let me get back to
the I am Jack's, I am Jack's
No,
enlarged
this-
colon or
this is
whatever.
the
But if they did that for the whole movie,
this is the anti-Fight Club. This is Durden loving all the stuff in his house and never wanting to change it. And him, reaching out to other people and hugging them and making relationships rather than beating them up with his fists.
when
It's
he
like-
is the
and-
when he goes over and he puts his dad's fucking song in the Bong & Olufsen CD player, I wanted to set the movie on fire.
Yeah, it's
Like-
again, it's almost a reaction to Fight Club. It's weird. It's like it's so opposite in a lot of ways.
I had not, since we just watched Fight Club, but I hadn't seen About a Boy since it came out. I'd completely forgotten that he also goes to support groups under false pretense.
Yeah.
What was it called, Chris?
Spat,
It's
Yeah, it's
fat. Single parents alone together.
Yes.
which is just the dumbest fucking.
And they
name.
probably all hug at the end, just like
This character in the book gets a lot more book time. She's a bit more of a caricature in the movie, and the reason this movie is this is called about, like, there's an entire Nirvana angle that they decided
I read about this.
2001 was no longer relevant, and so they dropped the entire fucking thing. Like, this character is completely devastated by the death of Kurt Cobain in the book, and that becomes like a whole other subplot, and they just dropped it completely.
Well, you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that setting it contemporarily.
That
Yeah.
entire talent show shit at the end is sort of that. I don't know where the fuck that came from.
Well, you know what that's called the grand gesture. It's a wrong
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But what remains,
What makes Rachel Weisz like him again?
Exactly. That's the
stuff-
grand gesture.
the stuff that works for me though is that in the bones of this movie are still the bones of the plot in the book, which is it takes, I mean, to a certain extent, it takes depression fairly seriously for a movie of this type.
Oh, I disagree.
In as much as you've got a character in a movie filled with an A-list rom-com star, like in the first act, tries to kill herself.
She's laying in a pool of vomit.
Like she's and the relationship with her son, like it's been dumbed way down, but that I still feel like that is a subject that usually is not discussed at all in a movie this type, and
No, it's
Her
not.
depression is extraordinarily Hollywood depression.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
There's
a lot of crying at the expense.
as someone who suffered from depression for my entire adult life and have a number of friends who have depression, like that's not what depression's like.
No.
Like,
Well, no, this is it's the thing is displaying it as like suicide attempt beginning and being you're depressed or being psychologically vulnerable like that. It causes the whole film to warp. It's like no one knows how to handle this for the rest of the film. So eventually they had to do enough other stuff to kind of steamroll it down. Like they had to flatten it.
It's not something that you can wrap up in a bow for a happy ending.
No, it's not. It's at least they didn't do that. At least they didn't say, "Oh, you're all cured now." It's like
I feel like it implies that
there's an ongoing thing.
I disagree that it implies that. I think it just sort of glosses over it, and we assume that her life has gotten marginally better. Things are looking up.
That's Hugh Grant showed up.
I actually like
she's killed in a car accident.
AI is another movie.
She doesn't know how to fucking drive.
50%, like getting pulled in two totally different directions. Like Spielberg versus Kubrick. This is a very strong book that is being pulled in the rom-com, and it's like the tone sort of seesaws around. Like I said, I still like it.
Whipsaws around.
It came around. This book and movie came around at a time when, like I ended up. I think I've referred to him as my rent-a-kid, but I ended up like this is the very same year that this movie came out. I mean, I got into a mentoring relationship with a kid who was 11, and I don't want to say that this movie sort of pushed me in that direction, but I was definitely thinking about it at the time. And I think, like I said, I think Hugh Grant is really good in this for no other reason than it's like this is where it pivoted, because there's the 4 Weddings and Horse and Hound Hugh Grant, and then there's this and everything that sort of followed where he dropped that shit by and large and became way more interesting to me.
I read the notes that Hugh Grant was getting a little depressed about his career when he made this film. It was like he wanted to get something a little more depth to it.
I don't want to shed his skin and change things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, he's a classically trained Shakespearean actor. Like he wanted to not be this guy.
Well, he himself has said, "I basically play the same character in 4 Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill."
Yeah.
Well, they told him they were aware of this enough to they nicknamed him Floppy in that other movie.
I mean, it's not just it's the hair, and it's like it's almost
his
like
hair. He stopped.
His eyes in that other movie are like this.
Yeah.
In this movie, they've straightened back out.
You know what's weird is they actually
right.
Good he pointed out that the 4 Weddings and Notting and this, because would it be cool if they actually was the same character in every movie? Maybe
not from his standpoint.
No, again with the Bridget Jones angle, but it went out for him. But I thought it would be very interesting in terms of like.
I think that there's a lot of things about this I still like. I thought the soundtrack sort of works. It's well shot. I mean, again, this is the guy that made American Pie. So, like I said, when I heard he was doing, it's like, oh, this is gonna suck.
Oh, this kid shut up like a weed.
My expectations were around my ankles going in, and Gloom Girl and I were pleasantly surprised that it wasn't horrible. Like we actually enjoyed a huge chunk of it. Watching it objectively now,
even though I didn't like it, I was also pleasantly surprised it wasn't horrible, because I've avoided this movie since it came out.
And Nicholas Hoult, I mean, who is having a hell of a run as one of the few child actors who got better looking the older he got.
Oh, dude. 11 years later, he did Warm Bodies, and it's like it's like a total transformation.
He's got it's
like a there, man.
Nosferatu that I sent this morning. I mean, like the guy's got a pretty healthy film career. I mean, I think he was dating J-Law for a while.
Good Lord.
He's doing just fine. And then he's as dorky. He's got the worst haircut. Is as dorky as possible, but there's a charm and a charisma to his character and a fearlessness in the performance that seems to have carried through. I mean, go watch Mad Max.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is about a boy. He has a huge part in this film. It's not just the cute kid that they trot in.
He's got to carry a lot of this movie.
So it's weird. I've given the right side's been so quiet on my screen. That's
for sure. We got Jared a corner for Jared and a corner.
Jared owns this movie just like I do.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Oops, I was muted. I was cooking dinner for Cohen. Sorry.
You're a good dad.
So
I
like this movie.
Your son.
It's about a boy. I like this movie. I liked it enough. I bought it on DVD when it came out a long time ago. I hear all the criticisms, and I don't think any of them are incredibly wrong. I still find it charming. I do think that the way Toni Collette handles or her portrayal of the character, I think it elevates it, I think, a bit, in terms of.
Well, Toni Collette's a really good actor.
I feel like everyone's depression can manifest differently. So I really liked her performance in that regard. I do think they take it pretty seriously, like everyone was saying at the beginning anyway. I do think Rachel Weisz is also underused. I wouldn't say massively, but underused for sure, because she's such a talent.
She comes in late. Yeah, that's the thing.
Hugh Grant
has very little to do.
She's a prize for
they just don't give her much to do. But yeah, I think
yes, and she's a prize for Hugh Grant.
Going to Nicholas Hoult, yeah, I just think he's fantastic in this. I think he's so incredible, and I think he's just stayed that way, or I've gotten better. I mean, I can't. I'll watch anything that guy does. He's so incredible.
Yeah, true. He has that ability to kind of draw your eye.
Yeah, he's so good in The Favorite. I will watch anything he's in, basically.
Yeah, if you haven't seen The Great too, his character in that is just insanely good. But yeah, I like this movie. I haven't read the novel. I know it's probably 1,000 times better, and more serious. But yeah, I agree with most of you guys. I think they're trying to make it a rom-com, and so how can they deal with all the heavy stuff?
It's really not a rom-com. It's a comedy drama, but it has
a foot in each genre.
Again, it has all of the tropes of a rom-com.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest problem with the movie is that it feels like a failed rom-com.
You realize
it would be a different film if it was probably more like the book. I'm imagining.
Yeah,
and
I feel like it would probably be more like High Fidelity.
You realize it's kind of the heart cart.
Well, High Fidelity is also very, very much a rom-com.
It is very much a rom-com.
It's just kind of a cooler one.
I think the comedy in that movie is really dialed down, especially when it gets to the heavier parts of that movie.
Especially like when he kills a duck with a piece of bread is stupid.
Yeah.
Like
right. The scene where they have sex in the car after her dad's funeral in High Fidelity, there is no comedy in that scene.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Those are two broken people who are being broken together.
And the kind of comedy is different. It's a more mature, subtle comedy.
We are moving away from the rom-com. There's rom-com elements. This is less like there's a scale. Like Notting Hill is 100%, and this is like 50%, and like High Fidelity is like 25%.
I think some of the success of Hornby's books is that he kind of takes like the basic idea and the concerns of a rom-com, and he builds something a little bit more substantial on it and a little more serious. And
also sets it around.
And then they turn the volume down on that when they make him into movies.
And then they turn the volume down.
I'm going to wager a kind of a theory here. When they got Hugh Grant cast in this and About a Boy, they probably wrote it to pull in more rom-com elements. So it started out as a real drama. And they wrote it down to a rom-com because that was what he. It was a conscious choice. He would bring in.
You're probably right.
Hugh Grant in it, we're
going to tweak it up.
We're going to. And the way that you play against that is like you make Seven. There's the famous story about the when they were doing the preview screenings for Seven, where it was like, do not go out there and pitch this to people as the guy from Driving Miss Daisy and the guy from A River Runs Through It. Like, don't do that. And what did they do? They were talking to people in malls, and they're like, hey, do you want to see a new movie starring the stars of Driving Miss Daisy and A River Runs Through It? And then they drag people in to see Seven. Wow. And literally Fincher's standing in the back of one of the screenings, and two women walk out to like drop off their cards. And we're like, the people who made this movie should be killed. Like, it's...
Well, I'll say one last thing about a boy, about a boy.
About a boy.
About you don't see a lot of, and this is Hornby. You don't see a lot of stories about this kind of friendship, and I love that. I know they don't. I know they didn't do it. This could have been better. Could have been a lot worse.
Going back to this scene, I love her questioning of the friendship and his sort of like, what?
But this is sort of like,
your son.
And this is sort of like, it reminds me of The Karate Kid in this way, which is also a very special movie about a friendship between an older dude and a younger dude. Like it's a similar thing. It's such a beautiful.
That never even considers being period or again, like, Hugh Grant's reaction to that thing is like, I have never conceived of this as a possibility. Like,
hold
I
on.
can't even imagine how you
This
would
is the
think
great
that.
thing about this film is that you see this wonderfully established relationship. He comes over, knocks on the door, and he watches TV, and he gets a little more involved, a little more involved. We're watching it as an audience members going, oh, this is really cute. Then
Right.
later on, Toni Collette basically screams at him in a restaurant
Yeah.
about how inappropriate it is.
And
it's
so
a
they did.
huge
So they did a
angle,
good job. They did a good job convincing us, just like Karate Kid, that these two really are friends.
Yes, exactly.
And,
right.
and really do need each other.
It proved the negative.
And when Hugh Grant looks at him and goes, "You didn't tell her?"
Yeah, like,
And he's like,
mind.
"Oh, I guess I forgot."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you son of a bitch.
I know.
Like,
It's
Yeah.
great because it weirdly enough, you would that the questions we were having about this is inappropriate or not were blown out in that one scene, which is great.
And I I don't like it as much as I did when it came out because I haven't seen it probably since
I'm
then.
like, yeah, 10. I like this 10% less than I did when I came out.
Yeah.
But I still like it. And
Ditto.
and I will say that, like, because I told my friend too, and I told you guys last week that, like, my mom saw this when it came out and liked it, and she said that Hugh Grant reminded her of me.
Aw.
And I said, that's awful, Mom, because he's an asshole. and then she didn't really elaborate, but then I was telling my friend that story, and she's like, well, I think your mom probably just meant like that sort of bachelor lifestyle that he has is sort of how I mean, it's a part of my life a little bit as well.
Lifestyle.
Okay, Obi-Wan.
man,
Obi-Wan.
the funny thing
Vito's
is,
been
if
sitting
that
there
had
for a while.
happened today, no one would remember.
No one would care.
Yeah.
I'd actually never seen this film before. I was actually I'm going to talk about it in a second. Let's go to Obi-Wan Biso there. You look like a Jedi tonight. I don't know what's going on
You
there.
kind of look like a Jedi, Jim.
Yeah,
It's the gray.
Okay.
It's the tan.
I know,
robe.
right?
Yeah,
He's
put the
like
hood up, Jim. There you go.
Oh my.
I'm Kylo Ren.
This is not.
No, that's
Now he's Uncle James.
Yeah.
So what's your corner,
Come
bud?
on, kid. Tell your mom we're hanging out.
Hey, speaking of a movie that's a friendship between an older guy and a younger guy,
Right?
Star Wars.
Yeah.
and guy.
you keep freezing up, Johnny.
Yeah,
You
you froze
froze
up
up,
there,
John.
John. What were you
Oh,
going
I
to say?
said Uncle Owen said stay away from that guy, and he didn't.
Anyway, Jim, what do you got?
Put a pin in that, John, till after the two shows. I liked it. I really did find myself wondering if it was going to turn into a better version of Fight Club when he goes to the spat meetings and is lying ass off. And I do like the way they handled a lot of things well, or at least not, at least unlike how most Hollywood rom-coms or sort of light films would do. So I found that good. Yeah,
Had you seen it?
I read the book and then I think I saw it, and
Wow.
I didn't remember much about it except that sort of the premise that the kid goes over to, his house and hangs out with him since he doesn't do anything. Yeah. I found myself in, and these are the first two yelling about movies that Judith and I both sat down and she sat down, sort of willingly watched.
No, that's not true, Jim. She watched what's the dance one with Jennifer?
She
Dirty
loves
Dancing.
that movie. Yeah.
Dirty
This
Dancing.
is the
She
first
watched
time
Dirty Dancing.
Alina
But what did that go with?
All right, oh, that's Jim. So
Can't remember what I picked with Dirty Dancing.
well, either way,
I don't think
It was Moulin Rouge.
yeah, this is the first film that
Yeah,
Alina
she
and I
didn't
watched
like
both
Mulan.
of them actually. She's seen it before. I have not seen either of these, so that was
Okay,
Yeah.
that
great,
was interesting. So
yeah,
okay,
I think 50% of the success of this is Hugh Grant. It's like if you cast somebody else in this movie, it's just not going to have what it has.
also star
Well,
power
he's
thing.
sort of a lovable rogue, even though he's an asshole.
Right.
Like
The scenes
in
where he
large
goes-
parts of the movie.
The scenes where he goes to the support group and he has to just lie on the spot because all the people in the hot seat.
He's so good at it.
He is so great in those scenes.
And also the scene where where one of the women drops him, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh yeah, this is a different thing. This is great. I should." And then that's what leads.
No, because he gets that look on his face at first,
Yeah.
like, oh wait, I didn't see that coming. Oh wait, I have to act sad now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of, there is another scene that I want to call out, which again goes back to me thinking of how underused Rachel Weisz is, though, is the dinner scene where he realizes he fucked up.
Yep.
Like, because that's him actually being sad about losing a relationship, because he's finally realized that, like, he does want more. He does, like, he doesn't have a problem with the fact that she has a kid. Like, he wants this. She, you know, he keeps talking about how smart
God,
she is.
did we talk about her kid already? Jesus Christ.
He's what's his name from Toy Story.
She doesn't love you. She loves me.
Now, it's weird to have a kid actually say that out loud. It's like the Oedipal moment of the whole film.
I do love
that kid was a psychopath.
I do love that he sort of smacks Marcus in the head, and then she smacks her own kid in the head. Like, it's like, yeah, fuck you guys. Like
I legitimately would, that kid would be cause for, like, you would reconsider dating her just based on that kid.
I think some therapy had to happen before I think can go forward in this thing. That's the thing. All right, so let's do that. Let's go to the cards.
I mean, yeah, I like it 10% less, but that's still a thumbs up.
I would be all the way up, but I'm actually with Tad about some between this and the other film. It's weird. I saw this first and I saw the one second, so
you're not wrong.
Yeah.
This is a thumbs down, but it's a mild thumbs down.
Okay,
it's not I don't hate this.